So magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. Kami ang Group 2 from AB Psychology 1B and AB Broadcasting. And we are here today to discuss and to report to you yung topic na na-assign sa amin. And I hope po na may matutunan tayo and may matutunan tayong lahat sa report na gagawin namin. So for our reporters today po, we have Kenlor Garcia, Rosh Requina, and Sweeth Jean Bolves. Pardon po for Rosh and Sweeth Jean. They are not here po because of some schedule issues po and conflicts. But makikita niyo po sila sa mga susunod naming reports. And then we have Jamaica Roldan and Daimler Rosh Deligero. And then the presentation editor po is me. I am Ericka Mae Campañano po. So let's start po. So just like what I have said a while ago po, wala po si Sweeth but makikita niyo po siya sa mga susunod naming report. So now, historical background of physical education. So when we say historical background po of physical education, ano po yung pumapasok sa isip natin? Ikaw, Daimler, ano pumapasok sa isip mo? Gulat ka.
Ito yung mga origin, pati yung mga paano nabuo yung physical education.
Tama. Okay. May iba pa bang gusto mag-share ng kanilang ideas and kaalaman sa historical background ng physical education? Ikaw, Elmer. Mukhang wala. So, sa mga manonood natin diyan, kasi po this video will be uploaded on YouTube. So, comment down below po kung ano sa tingin niyo yung mga kaalaman ninyo tungkol sa historical background of physical education. So, as for me po, on my personal perspective po, physical education is the origin of human evolution, kung paano tayo nagsimula gumalaw, sa kung paano tayo nagsimula lumakad, sa kung paano tayo nagsimula ng mga needs natin and mga wants natin, and then doon po nagsimula. So for me po, nagsimula ito sa mga primitive man, sa mga sinaunang tao, kumbaga yung mga Homo sapiens, yung mga Homo erectus, and then nag-develop na lang po siya into something new. And then kaya po ngayon is nandito na po tayo nagre-report about sa physical education. It is a progress po of human evolution. So now we will pass the stage po to Kuya Daimler, and siya po yung magre-report ng historical background. Hello.
Okay. So, historical background of PE. So, have you ever wondered na natanong sa sarili niyo kung saan ba galing talaga ang PE? So, here, physical education has existed for thousands of years. However, it didn't begin to be taught in schools in the United States until in the 1800s, when gymnastics first formed part of some schools' curriculum. Today, physical education is compulsory in schools throughout the United States and is taught in the schools worldwide. The health benefits of physical education make it an essential part of any child's learning experience. So, let's start with the primitive society. Sa pinaka-first period of time, saan nanggaling ang physical education. So, primitive society, primitive man, move according to their satisfaction, needs, and necessity. They just live by means of hunting such wild animals in the forest or by fishing along the rivers, streams, and sometimes they engage in welfare murder to ensure their protection from adverse elements or a hostile environments. So in primitive society here, they're not just hunting wild animals or fishes, but also they climb on trees, mountains, they swim, or maybe siguro marunong ba sila lumangoy? Or maybe they can carry heavy rocks just to build their homes. And also here primitive man, a character for primitive man in this period where they have already a mind of a human, but they can do anything they want. They do what they want, they do what they need to themselves, just to satisfy themselves. So next slide. Next slide. So yun nga, tulad na sinabi ko kanina, examples of a physical education of a primitive man is hunting wild animals, dance and play, fishing along the rivers, and engage murder for their protection. So, next. By the mid-19th century, physical education would make its way to the United States. The reasoning was similar to that of what the Greeks were using it for, which was to both educate and train soldiers for eventual battle. However, over the course of time, physical education would develop into something much more monumental. Schools across the country would begin to take health-related topics more seriously, both in the playground and in the classroom. And courses targeted toward physical development would be given more attention. So by the middle of the 19th century, of course, uh, here in-explain dito na nanggaling ang physical education from the Greeks, which specifically from the soldiers before. So physical education is originated to train, to train and create soldiers that would make them strong to do their task simultaneously and gusto yun. And next slide po. Kasi sa loob rin nung time ng sa history ng physical education, in the middle of 1800s, doon nagsimula lahat sa isang gymnastics. So basta i-explain na lang yun later. So this period is the Dark Ages. This period is when physical activities are only characterized by the strong, healthy, and physically morally deteriorated as their way of life. This was asceticism and scholasticism. Worldly pleasures are not recognized by them because they were prepared their lives for the next world. So their body is not physically fit because they focus on what they believe. Scholasticism believes the key to successful life is the development of the mental and intellectual powers. This belief has presented a challenge to physical activities that are not allowed to be one of the subjects in curriculum. In the Dark Ages, physical education is not really important, like physical exercise. They focus more on spiritual, mental, and intellectual education, something like that. They develop their spirit, their minds, because in the times of the Dark Ages, it is the image of war, destruction, and death. So most people in Dark Ages are traumatized. So they need to have a development and an enlightenment to them because they are traumatized because they came from destruction and death. So they need something that could make the people or a community to be comfortable with their lives, to face their fears, and to overcome it. Next slide. And also pala, asceticism is yun yung asceticism is yun yung spiritual, development of spiritual, and scholasticism is yung development of mental and intellectual. Yun. At the early of 500 to 900 AD, in the year of the Lord, there was no need for physical education. Yun nga, tulad sinabi kanina, because life was a physical test just to live. People has to work that required heavy physical activities. So hindi sila naniniwala sa physical education. They don't care about physical education because they focus more on spiritual. Because they knew that we don't need to exercise in their time. They don't need to exercise because we are already exercising now. We are already, because our body is just suffering in this world. So they focus on more like religious belief. In 1225 to 1274 AD, an Italian philosopher named Saint Thomas Aquinas Embrace physical fitness and recreation as positive for promoting social and moral well-being. Aquina said that intelligence depends in part on the physical fitness level of an individual. Dito, sa Dark Ages rin, naging itatak rin ng Dark Ages kasi the biggest and most important contribution of Dark Ages is yung pagde-develop ng physical education. Pero dito, underdeveloped pa lang physical education. They focus more on mentally and spiritual pa lang dito sa time na to. So, next. The only profession nobility had was war. Diba? War, Dark Ages. Thus, physical education and sports prepared the young for the military. War, not peace, was the normal way of life. Diba? So, puro patay lang paligid nila. They don't care na ano. But may mga bata rin, no? Nasa-traumatize din sila. Mga hindi kayang makakita ng dugo-duguan. So, they really need mental, spiritual, and an intellectual development nung time na yan. So, major types of sports is archery, of course, pana. Quarterstaff. Ito yun yung parang may hawak na budyak. Yung parang you have a long spear, and then tatamaan mo yung kalaban mo. Dalawang players, which is ganun, hampasin mo yung mahabang stick na yun sa patumbahan lang. Ayan, golf. Typo yan. Golf yan. Sureness ako. Tapos, shinty or hurling. Shinty and hurling is a combination of soccer and baseball and hockey. Inside of hurling and shinty, where 5 players are playing in the field and they have a long bat, which they use the bat to hit the ball and hit the ball and tatapon yung bola, tatamaan, hampasin, tapos isushoot sa goal. Ganunan lang. And game ball. Itong game ball, ito na yung mga basic game ball. Basketball, soccer, yun. Skittles. Skittles naman is yun yung pasapasa ng hampas ng baseball, parang ping-pong, pero walang net. Tapos, hahampasin mo yung bola, 2 players lang yun, tapos hampasin yung bola, tapos dapat matamaan yung malaking paddle na kahoy sa likod ng player. So, parang i-guard yun nila yung paddle sa likod na, hindi yung matamaan. Yun. Tapos, hammer throw. Hammer throw, yun yung palayuan. Ihahagis yung hammer. Pero siguro noon hammer. Pero ngayon, parang yun yung parang bola na bakal. Stool ball. Nakalimutan ko na stool ball. Jousting. Ito yung horseman na nakakabayo yung mga tao. Tapos, 2 horsemen, ganyan. Tapos meron silang hawak na mahabang matulis na bakal. Tapos ang gagawin doon, tatakbo sila diretso sa isa't isa. Tapos yung gagamitin nila yung stick na yun, they will joust their opponent to fall off their horse. Tapos yun yung scoring doon. Patumbahan lang din. Same lang rin siya sa quarterstaff. Wrestling. Yun. Klaro rin wrestling. Patumbahan lang din. Paalisan lang din. Next slide! Age of Feudalism. Dito sa Age of Feudalism, ito yung time na natumba na ang Roman Empire. So, the period of feudalism came into being often after the death of powerful ruler Charlemagne in 1814. It was a system of lands in war that was based upon the allegiance and service of the nobleman or lord, which owned everything. The kinds of physical education were social and military in nature that strengthens and hardens the body to be rigorous of whatever task. Physical activities are played as a major part in the training of knighthood and for self-preservation. So kanina, Dark Ages, ang sinabi ko kanina, importante yung ang biggest contribution ng Dark Age is na-develop yung physical education. But, dun sa Dark Ages, na-develop na yung physical education by mentally and spiritually. Here, dito, na-develop na rin nila physically, dahan-dahan na nabubuo yung mga sport. Kasabay din sa mga, especially medievalist, sa mga Europe lang talaga. Tapos dito sa Age of Feudalism, here, they found, kasi dito sa feudalism, hierarchical. Age of Feudalism is like a leader, a king. Feudalism means exchanging of goods and treasures. a king would call out a nobleman, and the nobleman would call out a knight to protect the king, and then the knight would call out the peasant to serve something to the king, to the nobleman. Ganun lang yun. Parang may triangle sila eh. Uh, sunod-sunuran lang sila. But here sa Age of Feudalism, nag-develop din dito ang physical education. Physically and mentally, they trained their knights and horsemen to become brave, to become strong, physically and mentally. Because in this age, they are since the fall of the Roman Empire, so they need some a massive soldiers and knights to protect the king. So kailangan nila ng matinding protection. Yun. Doon nila nilagay yung purpose, yung physical education. So physical education is nag-origin talaga from the security of people noon. Parang nagawa lang yung physical education para maging malakas ka, maging matibay ka, para maprotektahan mo yung sarili mo and yung kapwa mo sa paligid mo rin. Yun lang. Next.
Okay po, thank you po. So now we will proceed to the continuation of the report with Aika Roldan po.
Renaissance. The Renaissance was a fervent period of European cultural, artistic, political, and economic rebirth following the Middle Ages, generally described as a taking place from the 14th century to the 7th century. The Renaissance promoted the discovery of classical philosophy, literature, and arts. Physical education has an impact on their bodies and souls that is inspirational and endorsable. A good physical health promotes learning and rest and recreation that is needed by the body. This belief was necessary for health to develop the body as a preparation for welfare and recognition for the important contribution of physical education to social and moral life. In the history of physical education, modern European countries reflected the contribution of growth and advancement to which associated physical education. Next slide po. The contributors. First is Johann Bernhard Basedow in 1723 to 1790. Established a school called Philanthropinum, the first school in modern Europe, Germany, that offered a program where physical education was a part of the curriculum. The second one po is Johann Christoph Friedrich Gutsmuth in 1759 to 1839, who wrote two books named Gymnastik für die Jugend, Gymnastics for the Young and Games, which contain illustrations of various exercises and apparatus, arguments in favor of physical education institutions. Number 3 is Gustav Niblus. In 1816 to 1902, specialized in military gymnastics. His innovation was the inclusion of women in the school. Next slide po. Fourth and the last po is Neil Book in 1880 to 1950. In 1920, he established Denmark's and the world's first folk high school of physical education, and the fourth book changed the stereotypical male expression of bodily dynamics, which in Danish rural gymnastics had been almost military. Next slide po. Here are some contributors in development of physical education as early as the 20th century. First po is Thomas Dennis Wood, who were introduced natural gymnastic, which gave more emphasis on game and game skills. Second po is Clark Hell Turrington, emphasize on children's play activities. Number 3 po is Jesse Bancroft, influenced the development of physical education as a responsibility of homeroom teachers in the elementary school. And last po si Jacob Riis, symbolic of the playground movement in New York. So, dagdagan ko lang din po yung information. Magdadagdag po ako about naman po sa sports na nilaro during Renaissance period. Although many sports were introduced during the Renaissance period, but football, lawn bowling, and tennis were the three main sports that influenced today's time period the most. The Renaissance period was a time of change and rebirth. During this period, the rise of the middle class occurred. Next slide po. So, yung mga na-given po na tao tsaka mga contribution po nila is become broad and extensive programs that establish in school, recreational organization, and the agencies as a higher standard that had been produced. From 1825 to the present, the form of physical education taught in schools has altered dramatically. With gymnastics is still tough as a part of physical education, it no longer forms a key part of the curriculum. Instead, athletics and sports are the now main focus. The current emphasis on overall health and fitness, and particularly physical stamina and endurance, stems from World War II, when 45% of the first 2 million males drafted failed their physicals since 1941. Physical education has been given increased time, attention, and priority in American schools. So, overall po, ang Renaissance period po is help to interpret the worth of physical education to public in general. The belief become prevalent that physical education is necessary for health as a preparation for warfare, as a means of developing the body. Yun lang po. Next reporter po.
Thank you po, Miss Aika. So now we will proceed to the historical background of physical education in the Philippines, reported by Kenlor Garcia. Kenlor.
Hello po. So let's now move on to the physical education in the Philippines. Physical education in the Philippines dates back to primitive society when physical activity was very important for survival, making it necessarily for the adult to teach physical skills to the young. With the fast-changing times, it is quite interesting to note the strides made by physical education and how it has affected the lives of the people. So dates back before, physical education or physical activities is the way for the primitive society to survive in life po. When we say primitive society, those are people po or mga sinaunang tao na mayroong simpleng buhay, wherein they have limited sources into everything po. Hindi natin sila kagaya na we have access or nakaka-access tayo sa lahat ng bagay ngayon. And before, we don't have professionals po to teach physical education. That's why the adults in the society is in charge po to teach physical activities or physical skills to the young. Next slide. So next slide is the reason why we're having the physical education today. So it is the 1987 Philippine Constitution, Republic Act 14, Section 19, which states, the state shall promote physical education and encourage sports programs, league competitions, and amateur sports, including training for international competitions, to foster self-discipline, teamwork, and excellence for the development of a healthy and alert citizenry. Next is all educational institutions shall undertake regular sports activities throughout the country in cooperation with athletic clubs and other sectors. So that is in the 1987 Philippine Constitution, Republic Act 14, Section 19, which promotes the physical education. So next slide. So let's now move on to the development of physical education during the pre-Spanish period. So the primitive society that we have on the pre-Spanish period is the Negritos, or what we so-called Atas. They use physical activity to gather foods. Let's say, for example, when their tribe is going hunting and they will hunt wild animals, they need to perform physical activity or their physical skills in order for them to catch that particular wild animals, which means during this era, the physical activity is very important in their daily survival and at the same time for their protection from their enemies. So aside from ginagamit nila ang physical education or mga physical activities or skills sa paggather ng foods, they also use it para to protect themselves against their enemies. When I say enemies, it can be those wild animals po or the other tribes that can cause harm to them. And another physical activity, sorry, another physical activity on this era is planting, which is one of the source of food nila. And dancing also exists on this period. But sa kanila, they do consider dancing one of the religious activity which they use they use dancing to please their gods, to cure their sick, to call for rain when drought occurs after a bountiful harvest, and also for if nag-victory sila in a tribal war. And lastly, favorite pastime nila on this era is batting and swimming. Next slide, please. So let's move on to the Spanish regime. So the Spanish conquest of the Philippines did not have much effect on the physical activities of the people, except the enforced labor among the lower class of the people and building of the churches. Generally, the people live in the sedentary life while waiting for the harvest time after planting. So
Sir Kenlor, excuse me, naka-off mic po.
naka-off mic.
Siguro ulit sa Spanish regime.
Sorry. So again, it doesn't affect much the physical activity of the people during this period of time, the Spanish regime, except for those mga taong na-enforce or naatasan, especially sa mga lower class people na mag-help na mag-build or i-construct some of the historical churches natin dito sa Philippines. And generally, people live in sedentary life while waiting for harvest time after planting. So during this period of time then, yung mga tao dito is nag-live into a sedentary life, which means a lifestyle with a lot of sitting and laying down with very little to no exercises. So limited lang yung physical activities na ginagawa nila during this time. So same as true with the pre-Spanish period, their favorite pastime also is batting and swimming. And dancing also continued one of the major physical activities enjoyed by people on this era. We have the dances like fandango dance, the caracha, the jota, the polk, mazurka, rigodon, and lanceros. And we have also ceremonial dances like Santa Cruzan. I know that you are familiar with this. This is performed during the religious events. And also, meron ding mga games na nag-exist during this period of time like Pabitin, Palo Sebo, Juego de Anillo, and lastly, the Sungka. So let's move on to the American period. So after the signing of Treaty of Paris on December 10, 1898, schools were reopened, wherein noong 1901, physical exercises was one of the subject introduced in public schools, and regular program of athletics was developed. So noong 1901, na-introduce sa public school or naging subject sa public school ang physical exercises. And noong 1905, baseball and track and field were introduced and taught to the young boys in schools. Noong 1909, the athletic program was inaugurated and much emphasis to the playing of Western sport and the coaching of tennis. So when we say Western sports po, those are basketball, baseball, soccer, and football. And noong 1910, Noong 1910, basketball was first introduced as a game for girls in the carnival meet held in Manila, but was later discontinued in 1914. So noong 1910, na-introduce yung basketball as a game ng girls in a carnival meet which is Peria doon sa Manila, and na-discontinued siya noong 1914. Next slide please. Noong 1911 naman, the athletic book was published which prescribed the simple group games and rules for the team sports. Noong 1911, dito na tayo nagkaroon ng athletic book na naglalaman ng mga simple group games and mga rules for the team sports. Noong 1914, the Teachers' Vacation Assembly in Manila gave special training to Filipino teachers. So, etong training na to is para ma-improve yung coaching skills ng mga teachers noon. Noong 1919, Physical Education a Manual, a manual for teachers was published which was submitted by Special Committee of Superintendent and edited by Frederick O. England. Noong 1920, physical education was made a required subject and curriculum of all public school. So noong 1920, dito na nadagdag sa curriculum ng public school ang physical education. Noong 1928, a summer school for coaching was held with the aim of helping the public schools, teachers, in change of athletics to improve their coaching methods. Next. So let's move on to the Japanese period. Japanese military administration obliged all public schools to perform daily calisthenics on air called Radio Taiso. So let's start with calisthenics. Calisthenics is a form of strength training wherein it focuses to exercise the large muscles of our body. And yung Radio Taiso na pinagawa noon ng mga military sa Japanese military is it's like a warm-up exercise na warm-up calisthenics performed to music and guidance from the radio broadcast. So it means ito parang simple warm-ups lang ang steps while may sinusundan kang music and yung nagtuturo na or the instructor is nasa radio wherein yun yung sinusunod ng mga tao noong Japanese period. Kung ano yung ini-instruct ng instructor dun sa sa radio, yun yung sinusunod nilang ng mga tao noon sa Japanese period. Yan lang. Thank you. So lastly, to the development of physical education in the Philippines, we have the post-war to present, which is reported by Elijah Josh R. Campañano po. Thank you.
So this is not a report po, this is the summary of everything because post-war to present is the generalization of everything that we have learned and we have developed over the years from the primitive man to the Renaissance to up to makarating yung mga Spanish and Americans and Japanese here in our country. So it is a development of culture, diversity, and yung kung paano mismo tayo matuto at gumalaw at mag-develop ng ating paggalaw at pagpahalaga natin sa ating katawan at sa physical education as itself. So ayun po, yung post-war, iba post-war meaning after all the things like the World War II, yung mga naranasan nating wars, and then to the present, it is patuloy pa pong nagpo-progress. Hindi lang po porket ngayon po is ganito na yung physical education na sobrang laguna. Kagaya po ngayon, di ba, we have the luxury to play the sports na before is hindi pa naman develop, like volleyball, sobrang developed na po na volleyball, like basketball, like football and anything. So ayun po, this post to present of physical education is all about us na po. So ayun po, it's about kung ano yung meron tayo ngayon. Kaya po ngayon is nagre-report po kami, kaya po din po yung ibang tao is nag-aaral about physical education because ayun na nga po, nag-progress na po ito at nag-evolve into something new. And we hope po na yung generation namin, na yung Gen Z tayo, di ba? Gen Z and millennials is magkaroon po kami ng sarili naming contribution into physical education so that the future kids or childs na manggagaling sa amin is magkaroon din po sila ng nice experience sa pag-aaral ng physical education. So ayun lang po, maraming salamat sa inyong pakikinig. So kami muli ang Group 2 from AB Psychology 1B and AB Broadcasting. And ayun po ang aming report. So any realization, guys?
Wait, may idadagdag ako.
Okay.
Yung doon lang sa part ng mga sinaunang sports nung Dark Ages. Napalikod pala ako. Stool ball pala yung tawag doon sa parang table tennis ng walang net, ng walang mesa, tapos may paddle sa likod, tapos dapat masama ng dalawang opponent. Yung skittles naman, yun yung, ano ba yan? Parang siyang bowling, pero nasa field ka. Parang isa siyang village sport, ganun. So parang sa damu-damuhan, tapos yung mga pin mo doon is mga kahoy. Tapos yung bola mo doon, gawa sa goma, hindi siya bakal, tulad sa bowling. Para siyang bowling, pero pang-outdoor siya na bowling. Yan ang skill. Yan lang.
Okay. I-note nyo yan, guys. So, any realization, guys, from the group, yung mga nag-report, upon reporting and researching and studying the concept and the overall ng ating history about physical education, ano yung natutunan nyo? And how would you apply it in your life as you grow up? So, sige, simulan ko. For me, kasi yung pagkakaintindi ko is yung physical education kasi is a progress of something. It is an innovation, it is a progression, ito yung upgrade ng lahat ng mga sinimula ng mga ancestors natin, ng mga sinaunang tao. So for me, ayun nga, it is an innovation and progression, and lagi natin tatandaan sa mga sarili natin na nothing is permanent but so is change. Katulad nung sinabi ko nung nakaraan nung nagkamalit nung wala tayong sounds. So ayun, nothing is permanent but so is change. So ang permanent lang sa mundo is change. And katulad nga ng physical education, patuloy pa siya magpo-progress and mag-change pa siya ng mag-change into something new para din ma-upgrade yung level niya. And ma-apply ko yon sa mga buhay natin bilang tao kasi pag nag-stay ka lang sa kung sino ka and sa kung ano ka, you will not or wala kang mararating na something na gusto mong kagadin. So, ayun, may advice and yung pinaka-overall reflection ko is matuto tayong magbago depending on the things that surrounds us and matuto din tayo mag-upgrade sa mga sarili natin Because if hindi tayo mag-upgrade, hindi tayo magpa-progress. Ikaw, Nicole. Ikaw, Daimler. Ay, sige. Si Nicole.
Ay, sorry. Sa akin naman po, as of listening sa lahat ng reporters and kahit hindi nag-report si Elijah, yung opinion niya din. Kasi yung PE, hindi lang hinahanda tayo physically but mentally. Pero siguro nung dati katulad sa report ko, parang kumbaga mas important sa kanila yung physical. Kasi yun nga, sa mga wars, ganun. Kaya parang mas nag-focus sila sa body. Kesa, unlike ngayon na, di ba, yung PE natin is broad na. Meron sa mental, meron sa physical. Yun. Kaya doon yung about sa PE, yung history.
Okay, thank you. Ikaw, Daimler. Ready ka na din, Kenlor?
Ano to?
Realization.
Realization. I found out na dito sa PE, hindi lang pala about exercise lang or workout. But dito rin na nalaman ko rin na kung paano siya nabuo at paano siya nanggaling. Like, nanggaling pala to ang physical education sa mga parang magobyerno, mga men in uniform noon. Parang yun nga, pinafocus nila yung mga tao na matutong dumepensa, matutong maging matibay, maging malakas, ganun. So, yun nga. Tapos nag-develop na rin yung mga defensive skills, ginawa na rin siyang sports nowadays. Example na rin doon yung archery. Yun lang.
Hello.
Ken.
Hello. So, aside from natutunan ko yung historical background ng PE, nalaman ko din na yung sa physical education, pwede din natin ma-develop yung mga leadership skills natin and teamwork skills as a student. Yun lang.
So, ayun, thank you po. So, in overall, we wanted to say thank you to everyone na naging part ng progress ng physical education because without you, wala kami dito at hindi kami nagre-report na about this. Thank you to your contributions and sana po ayun nga, katulad na sabi ko kanina maging part din kami ng history at makatulong kami sa progression ng physical education. So maraming salamat po ulit. Muli ako si Elijah Joy R Campañano and we have our reporters. We have Daimler. Kaway-kaway naman. We have Kenlor. And we have Nicole Roldan. So hanggang sa muli po, please, if you have any suggestion or criticism about our reporting, you may comment down it below. So thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. Stop.